Hello, everyone. I am Sally Dr. Pannatheri. Greetings from Myanmar. So, in this Dhamma Talk series, I am particularly going to share with you grief and Buddhism. Okay, so grief and Buddhism in both Buddhist perspective as well as the Western perspective. So, as we all know, the grief is a major problem and one of the mental issues that we are facing in these days. Yeah, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we all face loss and grief, and we have lost our loved ones during the COVID pandemic. And the world is threatened by many mental issues, and grief is one of them. So today I like to share with you about this, okay? These days we are facing different disasters as well, like floods, storms, and different types of diseases. So we all are losing our loved ones in many, many ways. Some way, somehow, we are losing our loved ones. So grief is really, really important for us to understand. And we should learn how to deal with grief and how to heal grief. So I like to share about this, okay? And there are many scholars that interpret grief. So some of them say like the grief is a natural response to the loss of loved ones. Okay, and some also say that grief is not just for the loss of humans, but also for the loss of the things we loved. And some bereavement experts mention that grief is a natural phenomenon and a process of reacting to losing a loved one. So these are the things, these are the sayings by the bereavement experts. Okay, so therefore, grief is not just limited to human loss, but it can also result from the loss of an object, similar to the loss of a human. Why? Because some object that we really attach too much. So it's similar to a human, similar to the loss of love, our loved ones, like that. So grief may be related to the loss of a relationship with a human being or any object that we love or that we attach to. So grief may arise after moving from a new place or going through a relationship breakdown or like losing a job or business failure or like having a physical illness, for example. So suffering from grief includes physical, behavioral, emotional, cognitive, social, cultural, and spiritual reactions to the death of our loved ones. So some common meanings are for grief, like they are mental suffering or distress or intense sadness or sorrow or like feeling of great sadness. So we all try to express grief with many different terminologies. So these all are caused by loss, caused by loss of our loved one, especially at the death at their deaths or the death of someone that we loved. Okay, so grief is and kind of the natural response to losing someone or something we care about. So many scholars and researchers describe that grief is highly individual experience, and there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Okay, so I like to share how the grief experts interprets or define grief. Okay, so here are some the kind of the experts. For example, as we all know, the Sigmund Freud. Yeah, Sigmund Freud commented that grieving was a natural process that should not be tampered with. So he stated that grief has traditionally been seen as a healthy, normal, and universal process. So we don't need to be afraid to grieve, or we don't need to feel down with suffering from grief. This is normal. This is a healthy process. This is a universal process that we all face. Yeah, so the emphasis in Freud's grief word theory on grief is concerned with its personal attachment. So he mentioned personal attachment. Okay, the next one, the grief expert is Colin Murray Parks. So he mentioned that grief is just as much a part of life as the joy of love. He stated very, very beautifully, grief is a price we pay for love, the cost of commitment. This is very beautiful statement for grief. So Colin Murray Parks, in his book on traumatic bereavements, he states that in general, people are vulnerable to grief, but some are more vulnerable and more susceptible to trauma than others. He stressed that grief can even contribute to such psychiatric problems as major depression. Okay, the next one is very famous person. He is famous for his attachment theory, the father of attachment theory, John Bowlby. John Bowlby, he mentioned that grief is an adaptive process to the death of a human. So these are the statements and the interpretations of the very famous persons and the words. So there are many, as I mentioned, many scholars and many researchers describe that grief is a kind of the natural emotional response to loss. But some regard grief as a mental illness. It's not a normal process. So let's see whether grief is a mental illness or not. So I'm going to explain about it in my next video, whether grief is a mental illness or not. Thank you very much for your watching.